Those of you who follow me on social media must be tired of seeing this thing by now. This right here is Racer RV131, a mouthful, as these things for some reason tend to be. I'm going to be calling it the double X for the purposes of this review, okay? This, as you can tell, is clearly Embernic's answer to the... Jesus, I almost dropped this thing. The double X is clearly Embernic's response to the Miyoo Mini, which has been lauded all over the internet as one of the best emulating devices you can get right now. So, considering this thing's whole reason for existing is to give the Miyoo Mini a run for its money, how does it stack up? Well, let's have a look. The RG35XX, again, I'm going to be calling it a double X because that name is a mouthful, is amazing from a build quality standpoint. You got this IPS screen here that's nice, bright, the colors are very vivid. I don't think they're popping on camera quite as well as they do in real life. It's always hard to capture that vibrance on camera. I can adjust the exposure here slightly and maybe it'll get a more faithful interpretation of the colors there on your screen. But I gotta tell you, the IPS panel here that they use for this device is very nice, very bright, great viewing angles. I have no notes. The screen is absolutely gorgeous. And it's quite bright too. You can turn up the brightness by holding the menu button and, oh yeah, so because I already blew up the exposure here on the camera, probably shouldn't do this. In real life, oh my god, it's bright as hell. Now, the camera is fooling you. I mean, it's burning my eyes a little bit, but I can make out all the colors still just fine. It's not focusing on, yeah, see, it's incredibly bright. So I'm gonna turn it back down and now you can actually see what's on the screen. So let's go over the body of the device here. I'm gonna turn off the screen here for a moment. So on the left-hand side here, you have the volume rocker. On the front, you know, it looks like a Game Boy, including that little slant here at the bottom with the speaker grill, so very faithful reproduction of the classic Game Boy. You got a D-pad here at the front that's nice, not too mushy, not too clicky. It's very good. Embernic is great at making these D-pads, and with the double X, you know, seems like they spared no expense. They went with their usual quality stuff. Feels very good. Start and select feel just about right. The menu button here in the middle, also very similar to the layout you have here on the Miyoo Mini. The main difference here, I would say, obviously the size. The double X is noticeably bigger, which means it might be much more comfortable for most people to hold during a long play session. You got over here the face buttons again. Embernic does a really great job at these buttons. They're not too mushy, not too clicky. They're rounded here in a very satisfying way, nice and glossy. It looks beautiful. On the other side here, you have that power button. You have the reset button, which is something that you'll find you need with these Chinese emulation devices. The OS, and put a pin on that because we're gonna have to circle back to that one, sometimes can be a little unstable. Games will hang and freeze from time to time. It doesn't hinder your play experience that much, at least in my experience. This is not a button I find myself using very often, but it's great that it's there. With other devices like the Miyoo Mini, if something crashes drastically and you just cannot get it to reboot or anything, you can always pop the battery out and then, you know, you're good to go. With the double X, you cannot take the battery out easily, but you can reset it right here, so that's great. On the side here, you have two slots for micro SD cards. You have one slot where you're gonna have your operating system, another slot where you could presumably get more ROMs, get a second micro SD card in there with all of your ROMs. Fill this thing, go crazy with all the games they've been downloading illegally off the internet. I know what you're doing. I know what you're up to. However, you'll probably notice I didn't sound very confident about that feature. That's because I couldn't get it to work quite right. And again, the OS might be to blame. Just hold that thought. On the top here, you have a pair of indicator lights. The one on the right will illuminate when the device is on, and the one on the left is going to come on when you plug it into charge. You also have a mini HDMI out there on the top, which is a welcome addition. As you know, the Miyoo Mini lacks such a feature, so you cannot play this on on a big screen on the monitor. So it's nice that this is available. And at the bottom, you have that ubiquitous USB-C charging port and a headphone jack. Side note, does anybody even have wired headphones anymore? Maybe the audiophiles might still, but I haven't had a pair of wired headphones in such a long time. Still, I know I might be in the minority, so it's nice that they have that there. And on the back, you have two pairs of shoulder buttons. Now, these are already a pretty decent improvement over the Miyoo Mini. Personally, I don't have a huge issue with the shoulder buttons on the Mio Mini. However, they are pretty small and close together, and there's not a very easy way to differentiate them apart. R2 and L2 are slightly raised, but not really that much. And sure, your fingertips are pretty sensitive. You're going to feel this, but it's not super great to actually activate them. So if you're playing a game where you're using a lot of the shoulder buttons on, say, PS1, this might not be the absolute best device for you. These triggers here, on the other hand, they're much, much better. They're bigger. It's much easier to kind of feel them back here when you're playing a game. And I will say this, still on the form factor, I really appreciate the fact that the XX is a little more angular on the sides here. I'm not sure if you can see what I mean, but if you were to contrast it to the Mio Mini feels a little bit more rounded, and I like that they went a different direction with this guy here. This reminds me more of a Game Boy Pocket, which also felt a little bit more angular on the sides. I really like, I have a Game Boy Pocket right here, and you know, from playing with it, I can see obviously my memory fooled me because it's quite rounded on the side. Oh, look at how close in size they are. It's amazing. So for some reason, to me, this a little more angular corner here makes me think that this looks more like a Game Boy Pocket, even though, you know, my memory is playing tricks on me. So let's talk about the OS that I mentioned. Out of the box, the XX come with this custom OS by Ambernick that feels strangely old. I have a Dingo A320 somewhere here in my studio. Oh, it's right there. This guy right here is the very first device I ever reviewed on YouTube. It's old, it's not very good. The battery is remarkable, but everything else about it is terrible. And back then, this is some close to 10 years ago, maybe more, it seemed amazing. A device this small, you can just throw a mini SD card in there, which, like, that's not even a thing anymore. Like, maybe you never even seen one of these. I realize now. That was a mini SD card. It was a format that didn't last very long, and this is not even the actual card, but an adapter for a micro SD card. And there's only 1 gig. You see, this thing is old. Back then, that's what we got. Anyway, the operating system on the XX reminded me of the experience I had on this thing, and that's not a compliment in the least. The operating system on the XX, out of the box, is so strangely out of date, and I went on to install custom firmware immediately, and that's the beauty of these things. If you have the patience to tinker with it, chances are, by the time you're watching this video, the operating system has been improved by the community. I haven't updated to the most recent version of the operating system I installed here. It's called Garlic OS by Black Seraph. Big shout out to Black Seraph. This community would not be the same without you, so thank you. So the operating system was a bit tricky to install, but that might just be because I'm kind of old and impatient, and I have this bad habit of skipping over some steps in the tutorial because in my great wisdom, I look at it and I think, I probably don't need to do that step, right? Like, I sort of get what that's supposed to do. I don't need that. I'm going to skip that. And lo and behold, by the end of the process, the thing doesn't even turn on anymore. That's what ended up happening, and I have to reformat the card, start over from scratch. So after a couple of rounds of that, and a lot of frustration and a lot of coffee because it was pretty late, I have this problem that I cannot go to bed if one of my, tech toys doesn't work 100%. I have to fix that before I can actually relax. Anyway, I should see someone about that. After a few posts on the single board computer gaming subreddit, I highly recommend it, by the way, if you're into this hobby. You're gonna find a lot of like-minded individuals, a lot of recommendations for both the devices and games, and a lot of solutions for common issues. It's a great place. If you're into this at all, you need to check it out. Anyway, those guys there were able to help me. I installed Garlic OS, I got the system working, and immediately the experience was much improved. So this now works a little bit more like the Mio Mini, where if I press the menu button here, I think I've pressed it twice sometimes. Yeah, there you go. The OS is pretty new by the time I installed it. I haven't updated it, so like I said, it's probably a lot more stable now. But yeah, you do have to press the menu button twice sometimes to get to the main menu. So you have a menu here with your recent games, so they're right there. You can favorite them by pressing Y, and as you can see there on the screen, they become blue, so it's a little bit easier to find your games because you can go into the menu here for favorites, and those are your games. You have here the consoles. The list here is going to populate based on the ROMs you put in the SD card. So right now, this is all I have. So this is the only systems I'm emulating. I got 2 squares here that I could, put some more ROMs in there to get this full with the 8 icons. Again, an OCD thing, but anyway. So as you can see there, and yes, I know I say that a lot in these reviews, I got NES, I got Game Boy, GBA, Game Boy Color, PlayStation, and Super Nintendo, and all of these run really well. Then again, not exactly surprising because these devices are pretty competent now, right? So for NES games, I don't have many. I'm not a huge connoisseur of the NES library, so I have... Did I just put it to sleep? I think I did. No, what happened there? See, I was just talking about instability. I don't think the game started. Let me press the menu button there. So yeah, as you can see there, and yeah, I realized I said it again, I was just lauding the qualities of the reset button. Looks like I get to use it this time. This is highly atypical, I gotta say. I don't think I've ever had the system crash like that on me, on just the menu. This is a very first. So don't let that give you a bad impression on the performance in this device. Let's try this again. So there's Castlevania, there's Fire and Ice. I'm absolutely obsessed with Fire and Ice. The game boots up pretty quick and right where I last left it. So it's a great experience. Let me turn down the brightness a little bit more here, or maybe the exposure on the camera again. There we go, maybe that's a little bit more faithful to the colors I'm seeing here. So yeah, the video does not do the screen justice. You'll probably find this in all the reviews for this device. And I suspect that if you're watching this one, you probably watched a few before, and you might end up watching some more. That is a point that most reviewers will mention repeatedly, how great this screen is and how the video does not do it justice at all. Considering the price point for this device, I'm very impressed with this screen. So press the menu button, go right back to the beginning. The system is actually pretty snappy, as you can see. Burger Time Deluxe, another huge classic. After I installed Garlic OS, I gained a lot of new features, like for instance being able to change the colorization here on a Game Boy game, for instance. So I like having that pea soup green. That's like the classic Game Boy look to me, and having Burger Time running on a device that looks just like a little miniature Game Boy with that pea soup green tint on the screen. It is amazing. Like, I'm really happy with this. So let's press the menu button there again. Let's go back to the consoles. You have GBA, you got your staples, you got your Advance Wars 2 there. That's where I was last. See, I love that. I love how quickly you boot right back to where you last left it. One thing I would like to see on this, and perhaps Black Surf is going to work on this for next releases. Maybe this is already out by the time I'm shooting this. So with the Onion OS, right, the Garlic OS analog on the Mio Mini, let's turn this thing on here. It handles switching games in a way that I find perhaps the best of any portable console I've ever used. When you boot up Onion OS on the Mio Mini, it takes a little while. So you're back in the game where you just left it, right? So if you press the menu button, it takes a screenshot, it saves the game, and you're greeted by this menu here where you have a little catalog of the games you've been playing. So say I want to play, Burger Time right there, right? So I just press the menu button and I'm right there. It was paused. So I paused right before I died. Anyway, so I'm done with Burger Time. I'm gonna press that button again. So here we go. It takes a screenshot, throws it in the main menu, and now it's back on that list. And then at a glance, I can see not only the last games I played, but exactly where I last left them. So there's Pokemon Red here. If I want to jump back into Red, there we go. We're in. So I suspect that eventually this feature is going to be added to Garlic OS, because right now I don't like the way it behaves so much. So if I'm in a game, I'm going to go into Super Nintendo. I'm going to try Aladdin for the Super Nintendo. So I don't think I configured fast forward for this one. That's okay. These are all running off of RetroArch, which I have a lot of personal trauma trying to set up RetroArches on all of these devices. So not the biggest fan of the platform, but it is what it is. So we're here into Aladdin for the SNES. So if I press menu, instead of doing that quick taking a screenshot and saving the game, I mean it does save the game, but it dumps me in this menu here that I like the Mio Mini way of handling that far better. So what else? We have Game Boy Color here. I only have Link's Awakening. Look at that. This is just gorgeous. This is absolutely gorgeous. With the Double X, you can emulate all the way up to the PlayStation. There's a lot of other systems this thing runs, quite a few in fact, but these are the systems that I gravitate towards. And I gotta say, I'm very impressed with this thing. The initial experience with the operating system out of the box was very disappointing, but I will say this: if this is your first device ever, if you don't plan on doing any tinkering, if you're not spoiled by so many other different experiences, so many devices, I know that most people don't have as many as I do and haven't experienced with as many, so maybe the operating system, as basic as it is when it comes out of the box, is good enough for you. The ROMs that it comes back with, my version anyway, the ROMs had a weird naming scheme with a bunch of numbers in front and they weren't alphabetized, so I had to clear the card and put put my own games in it so that it's easier to find the games, right? One thing I do miss from the OS though is that it was able to pull pictures from the folder where you store your ROMs. So if your SD card is like mine, organized with all the screenshots and all the box cover art and everything, the standard OS that this thing comes with out of the box will actually look a little prettier in that regard, because you know your list of games is not just a list of names. It's going to be somewhat closer to what I have on, say, this Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, which yes, I'm going to review. Oh, look at that! It's our buddy RGT85 making a cameo appearance here. Anyway, the brightness on this here is a little bit, you know, too much, and it's a little hard to make out the names of the. It's always hard to show these screens on video because the camera almost never does it justice. So anyway, as you can see here, right, it's pulling the, scraping the box art off of the internet, and then you have a list of games, but you also have the box art. It looks really nice. The presentation is really beautiful. Unfortunately, as of right now, the version I'm running right here, you don't have that. Even though this SD card is full with the images for these games. If I were to pop that SD card into, say, my RG351V, which is another great offering by Ambernic, a little bit bigger, as you can see, but generally speaking, pretty similar. If I were to put this card right there, you'd see all the box art. Right now, Garlic OS, my version, can't do that. So, to wrap it up, I think this is a great device for people who found the Mio Mini to be perhaps a little on the small side. This will be the device for you. The stock operating system has disappointed pretty much everywhere in the community across the board, but that's because us reviewers, we're a little spoiled. We want a little bit more features. For the newcomer, for somebody who just wants to get this thing and play games and doesn't care about all the extra features that, you know, the professionals care about, that'll be probably good enough for them. So there's that. And there's always the option that as you become more experienced with the device and you start demanding more from it, you can always install this free custom operating system by Black Seraph. I will, as always, leave a link in the description of where you can buy your own RG35XX. I'm not even sure how everybody else is pronouncing it. I'm just gonna call it XX. Honestly, on a day-to-day basis, I call this thing my Game Boy. When I wanna show this to someone, I'm not gonna be hitting them with like these long-ass serial number sounding names. I'm just gonna call it my little Game Boy. It's easy to recommend. It's beautiful. The build quality for the price point is remarkable. I gotta say, Ambernic has outdone themselves once again. This thing would be absolutely great if it came out of the box with this operating system. If Ambernic did the, you know, if they went the extra mile and they paired up with these very talented people like, you know, Black Seraph and everything. If only they went the extra mile and paired up with the talented developers we have in this community so that this device came out of the box with a better experience. And when it comes to the operating system, this thing would be an absolute no-brainer. As it stands, I will say, if you have other devices, it will likely not satisfy you the way it comes out of the box. You're going to have to tinker. But then again, if you're experienced with those things, you probably were expecting to do that already, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, easy to recommend, not too expensive, great size, great weight, the buttons all feel right. The screen is absolutely gorgeous. You got that mini HDMI out if you want to play on the big screen. It's seriously a great device. I'm incredibly impressed. Now, remember, this thing is an answer to the Mio Mini, right? The guys over at Mio, I suppose that's the name of the company because that's how they've been naming all of their devices, right? Like the Bit Boy. Where is my Bit Boy? The Bit Boy is, when you turn it on the first time, it says Mio on the screen, right? And it looks, it's right here. I have a few. The batteries on these guys are dead at the moment, but you're just gonna have to believe me. The operating system said Mio on the corner there. So it looks like it's the same company, even though they were officially quote-unquote named BitBoy, but you can see the resemblance, right? So anyway, my point is that Mio is responding to Ambernic's response to the Mio Mini. They're putting out the Mio Mini Plus. It's coming out soon. There's some leaks all over the internet. The community is very excited. It seems to be a pretty similar size to the XX, so it remains to be seen if maybe the Mio Mini Plus is the one to wait for. Anyway, as I mentioned, the link to buy your own XX is going to be in the description down below. This one, I will say, could be a little bit more available right now. I love this thing, by the way. After I installed Garlic OS, one thing you can do is by pressing L1 and R1, you can cycle through the different options for filters. And though I prefer the pea soup green, that's just so authentic for me, there's a bunch of different ones. There's a Super Game Boy colorization option for games that support it. Just great, just absolutely great. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If there's other devices you'd like me to review, drop me a comment down below. If you'd like to see behind the scenes stuff, follow me on social media, both Twitter and Instagram. I'm very active on both. And I think that's all the time I have for today. I'm Izzy and I'm done. Oh, I just changed the filter. I didn't mean to do that. Come on, where's my pea soup green? There we go. Let's be more gentle this time. There we go. And yes, as you saw, I did get my hands on the Retroid Pocket 3, these names, Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. It's the first Retroid product. Let's try that again. It's the first Retroid product that I was so excited about that I bought it myself. Usually these companies just send me this stuff. It's the very first time I bought one of these with my own money. So expect a review on this very, very soon. Okay, now I'm actually done. Those of you who follow me on social media must, by now, those of you who follow me on social media must be sick. Those of you who follow me on social media must, Jesus, how can I not? It's like such a simple sentence. I'm an English tutor. I can't even get that right. What the hell?